Hello and welcome to another video question and answer time with containerhome.info. Today's question, Liam Plant asks, what foundations for a residential home do you believe work best for container homes? If situational, I live in Sydney where we have heaps of sandstone. Thanks for your question, Liam. Okay, so this is a question that we quite bluntly we address in the members area of the site in some detail. So what I'm going to do, Liam, is I'm going to give you an overview of the discussion about container homes and foundations, and then I'm going to direct you to the members area so that you can look at the material that we provide there. So firstly, it's important to understand that when we talk about foundations in construction, the style of foundations that would be deemed to be the best foundation style for a project are going to be determined by a number of factors. The largest of those is the soil conditions or the site conditions on your parcel of land. And even though it's possible to say, look, in general, Sydney has a lot of sandstone type soil conditions, etc., the reality is that every building block, every block of land needs to have a soil survey done as part of the approvals process so that they can determine the quality of the soils on your site, their load bearing capabilities, etc. And then from that point, you can start to have a conversation about what type of foundation might be suitable for those conditions. So the idea that you could kind of take a area of land, let's say Texas or Sydney or London or whatever, and say, like what kind of foundation, unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. Part of this process is going to be you're going to get a soil survey done on your parcel of land, specifically where the house is being built. It's a localized soil test, and that's going to play a role here. Having said that, I do want to make some comments about containers because containers as a construction methodology certainly have some interesting points of view in terms of foundations. The first of which I'd like to point out to people is that of all of the construction methodologies in the world, container-based construction has the potential for the lightest weight and therefore the lowest cost foundations of all construction methodologies. There really isn't anything that comes close to the minimum foundation requirements of a container. So there are a number of, I guess what we call bullet points, advantages, let's call them, of the construction method. And one of them, quite frankly, is the fact that we can save a lot of money on a typical construction project because we can eliminate some of the very significant costs that are involved in foundations with traditional construction methodologies. That's part of the argument or part of the discussion about, so how do we save money with a container home? You have to basically realize that there's certain areas where cost savings can be realized, and this is one of them. There are a number of them, but this is one of them. So the first point, the first takeaway from this video, buddy, would be your localized soil conditions are going to play a role here. There needs to be a soil test based on where you're building the house. And then running parallel to that discussion is an understanding that we're going to ideally use the lightest weight foundations that we can get away with. Why are we going to do that? Quite bluntly, to save money. There are a couple of blanket rules that I like to sort of explain to people about container home foundations, and one of them is the simple fact that when we put a container on the ground, you can see here what this basically is this is a traditional slab type construction. The container is being lowered onto this slab. They're going to use the slab as the foundation. And everyone would be aware is that underneath this container here are steel supports. So one of the things about foundation design containers is, in my opinion, you need to basically allow air to get underneath the container. You don't want to kind of trap it where moisture can kind of trap in there. That's not going to create an ideal environment for rust and for corrosion. So in my opinion, any type of a pier foundation, you can see here this particular container home is raised off the ground. There's a crawl space underneath. any situation where you can basically have adequate airflow and minimize moisture and that sort of stuff is going to be a good starting point for discussion in foundation design. And again, we discussed this in more detail in the members area. So in general, I would steer people away from the idea of putting a steel container with steel sort of supports underneath on top of a concrete slab where air doesn't travel. It's just potentially going to accelerate corrosion issues. It's also very, very difficult to just even get underneath there and inspect the container to make sure everything's in good order. So if I go back to my photo here, it's very, very easy to get under there with a flashlight and have a look around and make sure everything's as it should be. So my first recommendation would be lightweight foundations, and then making sure that there's adequate space underneath the container home so you can ensure that there's air travels through there. Past that, how you choose to build your foundations is very much going to be on a project by project basis. For some people, their primary driver is cost, and so you can see in this particular couple of photographs here, what we're looking at is the lowest possible cost of foundation construction. This is literally little more than a piece of sonotube and some reinforcement bar and concrete. The most simplest, straightforward, and low cost foundation that's conceivably possible. And really anything up from there is practical. The bigger discussion is about, can we make it low cost? Can we make it suitable for the soil conditions? And can we create a space underneath the container so we can keep air flowing through the space underneath? Here's a photograph from a fairly famous container home project where, it's a final point I want to make, the builder of the project, his final complaint about the project, I suppose would say, his summary of the project was that he didn't feel that container home construction offered him any significant cost savings. And I understand his point. What you have to understand, though, is this is the foundation trench that he chose to dig for what is effectively a 320 square foot cabin. It's a cabin in the woods. So my point being here is that the foundations of the container are going to play a significant role in many aspects of the projects. One of them significantly is going to be in cost savings. So it's a deceptively simple conversation that then has many breakaway branches that we need to discuss: your specific project site, the type of building that we're talking about, the prevailing climatic conditions, etc., etc., etc. So I hope that at least provides you with like a very, very high level overview. And what I encourage you to do, Liam, is log into the members area and check out the video that we provide on container home foundations. I hope that helps. Thanks very much for your time, and I'll see you at the next video.